My boss demoted me, but still expected me to work with the same diligence. This story happened a couple of years ago, but before I get into it, I should share a little bit about myself to give some context. I grew up in a poor family in the southern US. Despite that, I was an excellent student, and because of it, I received a full scholarship to one of the top universities in the country, and possibly in the world. And no, I'm not trying to brag. I just quickly realized that I could absorb information easily and work at a high speed. Plus, my perseverance and discipline had already formed back when I used to collect cans for spare change and spent entire days helping my father outside. Being the oldest of 6 kids and growing up in poverty taught me to understand people's hidden motives and read between the lines. In other words, I was perfectly suited for subtle, malicious compliance. After graduating from a very good university, I returned home to be closer to my family and to start building a career. Also because the Northeast, where I studied, felt gloomy and gray to me. First, I took a terrible job just to start earning money. Then, I worked at a startup. Eventually, I landed a position at our county government agency where the salary was almost twice as high as at my first crappy job. The agency's office was known for insane turnover, toxic employees, and constant stress. The clients weren't the nicest people either. The job drained every ounce of energy. But back then, still being a young guy, I was just happy to be making good money. When I was offered the position, I accepted almost enthusiastically, as much as anyone can be enthusiastic about stepping straight into hell. I started working in May and immediately gave it my all. I read the 350-plus page manual in my free time, helped coworkers, and worked unpaid overtime. Sometimes I arrived at 8 a.m. and didn't leave until 2 to 3 a.m. I even had to cancel planned dates with my girlfriend because of urgent work calls. As a result, I consistently worked far more than I was supposed to, and they just kept piling more tasks on me because he can handle it. My supervisor loved saying things like, "That's how things are done here. It's for the good of the agency. And our best employees are those who sacrifice themselves." Outside of work, she seemed normal, but I was growing increasingly irritated by her speeches. Remember, I started working in May. By July, I was already looking for a way out. I wanted to get into an MBA program. I learned about one program I liked, and I was encouraged to apply. A couple of days later, the program director himself contacted me and scheduled an interview. It lasted only 15 minutes before he thanked me and ended the Skype call. By the end of the week, I received an email. I was accepted, granted a full scholarship, and offered a small monthly stipend in exchange for working 20 hours a week as a graduate assistant. I was over the moon and immediately sent back my signed acceptance. Just like that, in less than a week, I went from drowning under the weight of responsibilities to being a future grad student. The program started in January of the next year. I had about 5 months left, and I decided to endure my time at the agency to save some money before starting school. Since I'm an honest person, I immediately told my supervisor that I'd be quitting at the end of December because I had been offered an amazing MBA opportunity. She thanked me, praised my work, and said she would consider potential options. After a couple of weeks of brutal routine, I was finally called in for a conversation. My supervisor said that I could stay on staff, but the agency wanted to transfer me to a contract position. Basically, they needed to free up my current position to hire a new full-time employee. And of course, she framed it as for the good of the agency, and as something expected from a principled and hard-working employee like you. I asked for a week to think about it and requested documents outlining all changes, benefits, responsibilities, everything. She said she'd bring them the next day, and that's when the malicious compliance phase began. The next day, she handed me about 12 pages of text printed in tiny Times New Roman 10. Painful to read. That evening, going through them, I grew increasingly angry. They were stripping me of nearly all benefits except accumulated overtime, downgrading my position, and cutting perks. But halfway through the documents, I stumbled upon a clause that instantly changed my mood. I was now required not to work more than 40 hours a week and was forbidden from performing many duties I already hated. And most importantly, I was only obligated to do what was explicitly listed in the manual. In other words, do the minimum, go home. As soon as I saw that, a smile formed on my face, growing wider and wider. By the time I finished reading, I was grinning like the Grinch. I knew exactly what I would do. The next morning, I told my supervisor I accepted the new position. She was pleased, but not as pleased as I was. When I handed her the signed papers, she began outlining my tasks for the next 2 weeks. I calmly interrupted her and said I couldn't comply because I wanted to remain honest and follow the rules. Her face shifted from confusion to growing irritation. I explained that under the new contract, I was prohibited from doing many of the tasks I used to do, that I couldn't work overtime and was required to leave as soon as I hit 40 hours, that I wouldn't respond to messages or emails after reaching the limit, that I could no longer take on-call shifts. She would need to find a replacement, that I couldn't assist coworkers anymore because I no longer had signing authority or proper credentials. With every "I can't" I listed, her expression darkened more and more. When I returned to my desk, I began writing an email. See, my previous position required formal training to authorize document signing. Because of chaos in the county, they never sent me to the training, but they still assigned me the responsibilities. My requests for training had been ignored for months. I wrote an email to my supervisor, the office manager, and the regional director, as I had done many times before. But this time, I blind copied the big boss lady from the central office and her even higher-ranking superior. I asked for clarification on when I would finally receive training, since I had already been performing duties without proper qualifications. A few minutes later, a reply came from the state-level big boss herself. She wrote that she was upset to hear about the situation and would personally ensure I received the training. Moreover, she was shocked that I had been pressured into accepting a demotion and ordered that my salary not be reduced under any circumstances. The funniest part? The training was for a position I no longer held and didn't intend to hold, and regular sessions weren't available, so I had to travel to the state capital for an emergency session. Regulations required them to pay for my hotel and daily stipends. I checked ahead and found out there were major events happening in the capital, so I informed the big boss lady, saying I couldn't find a reasonably priced room, which violated contract policy. She personally found and booked me a luxury suite in an upscale hotel. The following week, I went to the training. Again, training for a job I no longer had. I essentially spent the week enjoying a fancy hotel, great food, and light entertainment. It was basically a paid vacation. When I returned to the office, I discovered 2 employees had quit and several others had reduced their hours. The big boss lady uncovered the office's incompetence after my email and cracked down hard. But thanks to my new status, I only did what I was obligated to do. Because of the chaos and staff shortages, I was often assigned to deliver things around the state. I pretended it interfered with my work, but sacrificed myself for the agency. In reality, I was easily racking up hours, sometimes up to 16 paid hours a day, plus mileage reimbursement. While everything around me burned, I sat comfortably at my desk, listened to music, and did my own thing. That's how I worked until I left, doing simple tasks and spending the rest of my time watching YouTube, browsing the internet, and waiting to hit 40 hours. Sometimes I was effectively off for the weekend by Wednesday afternoon. My life transformed from hell into comfort. I spent time with my girlfriend, played games, enjoyed hobbies. With my accumulated overtime pay, I paid for a Caribbean cruise in November. The trip was amazing. I went with childhood friends. My once powerful supervisor quietly wished me a good vacation and said she hoped I would return and not quit. I smirked and said I couldn't promise anything. While floating in the warm Caribbean waters, I reflected calmly on life and what I wanted. When I returned, I waited for my supervisor to show up. The moment she saw me, she knew what I'd say. Her cheerful mood at 9:15 a.m. evaporated instantly. I told her I wouldn't be able to stay until the end of December. I needed to leave 2 weeks earlier due to unforeseen issues with transitioning into my MBA program. She sighed and said, "I understand. Thank you for your 6 months of service to the agency. I'm sorry to see you go." For anyone curious, I completed my MBA with a perfect 4.0 GPA, and next week, I have an interview for a new position. Looks like I'm about to almost double my income again.